What's up guys, welcome back to my channel. This is VitruvianPhysique checking in from all the way back in 2017. I know, this is pretty crazy. This is time travel because I'm speaking to you guys all the way back from last year. And now that 30% of you probably clicked off this video and left due to my dad joke. Number one, Happy New Year guys. Today's video, this is something which I've wanted to make for a long time and it's pretty damn exciting. So the reason why I want to do this video, before we get into the good stuff, is January 1st. And we are well into the middle of winter and it's cold as hell. And that means a lot of people, we are into, we're right in the middle of our bulks. We are right in the middle of our mass gaining, strength gaining phase cycle, whatever you want to call it. And this is so important for two groups of individuals. Number one is the people who, maybe watching this video who are somewhat newer to training. If you were in your first 1, 2, 3 years of training, it's very important that you know your training and you get it down correctly, because in those first few years of training, you have more potential for mass and strength gains than you probably ever will for the rest of your life. Like the amount of muscle mass that you can put on between years 1 and 2, your first year of training and your second year of training, that is way more than what you can put on from years 9 to 10. If you do things right, that's the key word. And the second group of individuals is the other people I mentioned, the people who have been training for a while. Let's say you've been training for 4, 5, 6 years, and you consider yourself to be like more of an intermediate. You're no longer a beginner anymore, but you're not getting those beginner gains anymore. It kind of sucks because you're not putting on muscle and strength as fast as you used to because you got stronger and your progress has kind of slowed down. And you've kind of hit a wall where you're like, all right, I want to get to the next level. How do I do that? And it's not as simple as it once were. That is why I'm making this video. About like a month ago, after I finished my competition, I put out this big video. It was like bulking 101, and it was all about the nutrition. It was a massive 45-minute video, and I talked about everything related to eating to put on muscle and getting bigger and bulking and how to bulk, what kind of bulks there are. And that's great and all, but that misses pretty much 50% of the equation, which is training. So that is the purpose of this video. But not only that, this is a really exciting day because I've been talking about this for so long on my channel. So guys, finally this is the last video that I'm pretty much gonna blast about it. But today is the launch of my new strength and size. It's kind of like bodybuilding and powerlifting hybrid. Some people call it power building, whatever you want to call it. Today's the launch of my program. This thing has been in the works for a friggin' damn long time. Literally, since I finished my competition, even before that, I've been working on it. It was like a month of putting together the initial beta version. It was like a month of research to really figure out what I'm doing and do it perfectly. And then it was also 2 to 3 months of beta testing, because just once you have a beta version model, you need to actually go in and fine tune it. I mean, that's actually literally guys, a lot of people have been saying Igor, why are you waiting so long to launch this program? Because I need to go into the gym and I need to test this program out. And then I need to make, modifications, change the percentages, change the reps, change everything. It's been a lot, but today's finally the day that I'm launching this program, and I'm pretty damn excited for it. But guys, one thing on my channel, which I've always, my philosophy, which I've always adhered to is, although yes, there is a monetary aspect behind YouTube, that's always going to be my second priority. It's still pretty damn high on my priority list, but it's never going to be priority number one. Priority number one will always be educating you guys. Motivating, entertaining, all those things, but definitely educating, providing you useful information that you could utilize in your life, in your nutrition, your training, your whatever, and improve upon that. So that is the main goal of today. We're gonna talk about all these different training concepts, which I think are invaluable in your training strategy, especially if you're training for a combination of both muscle mass, muscle hypertrophy, and strength accumulation. The two of them, they are somewhat different goals, and you can specialize your training towards one or the other. And in this case, we're going to be trying to optimize for both. My previous program, which I launched, was a bodybuilding specific ultimate hypertrophy program. I launched that, I think it was back in the spring. That was good, and I'm proud of that. But this, no offense to earlier 2017 Igor, this kicks your ass. This blows that out of the water. Not just in terms of the different goal, because that was most specifically muscle hypertrophy. This is hypertrophy and strength accumulation. It's kind of like a 50-50 combination. Not just in that, but also in terms of the overall program complexity, in terms of the time that went into it, in terms of the fact that there's so much more to it because it's an actually interactive model as opposed to just like a PDF or just like a guide where it's kind of like you just read off a page and that's it. There's a lot more to it. But guys, I'm not going to get too much into that. But guys, I'm not going to write too much about that. You know that his program is out. It's going to kick ass. I guarantee it. If you try it, you'll love it 100%. Number one, before we even get into all this, I want to talk about strength and size. And a very easy way to look at it is correlation. Now, if you guys, I don't know if you guys learned about this in like grade 12 math, or maybe it was like first year university. I don't remember when you learned about this, but when you have two variables, this could be anything, right? This could be like, in our case, we're talking about muscle size and strength, how big a muscle is versus how strong a muscle is. It could be your quadriceps and it could be your actual weight that you can lift via the squat. They're two different variables. Every variable, any two variables, when you look at them, there's always going to be a correlation variable. That correlation in math, the actual variable is R. So when you have two variables that are positively correlated, that means as one goes up, the other one's going to go up as well. If the value R is a 1, that's a perfect correlation. That means if this goes up 20%, this is going to go up 20%. They go up equally together. Now, if that value is negative, that means if one goes up, the other one goes down. And if that value is 0, that means one goes up and this one, it could do whatever. It can go up, down. The two are uncorrelated. They have absolutely no ties together. This is like happiness and I don't know, the color of that building over there. They're probably unrelated at all to one another. So strength and size are positively correlated. That makes sense. Usually a bigger muscle is a stronger muscle. However, this is not a perfect correlation. The if I were to make up a number, and maybe it'd be like 0.5 or like 0.6 or 0.7 or something. If one goes up, chances are the other one's going to go up as well. However, it's not going to go up in the exact same amount. If my muscle mass goes up 20%, that doesn't mean my strength is going to go up 20%. It can go up 10, it can go up 30. It's going to be something like that. This is why it's very possible to have guys who are very, very big, but not that strong, or vice versa. Guys who are insanely strong, like picture like Olympic weightlifters, and the people who can like clean and jerk 400 pounds. Meanwhile, it's like some, relatively, not massive 160 pound, 21-year-old kid. I know people who are 40 pounds heavier than you in terms of raw muscle mass, yet they're not as strong as you. That's because the two variables aren't 100% correlated. A good example of this would be, again, like I said, happiness and money. Although obviously if you have a lot more money, you'll probably be happier, but it's not one-to-one. There are plenty of people out there who, make a lot more money and yet they're not that happy. And how I say money doesn't buy happiness? That's because the two variables are positively correlated, but it's not a perfect correlation. So because of that, it is technically possible to train for one specific goal. You can train more so for bodybuilding, and you can train more so for strength or powerlifting. Now, it's nearly impossible for you to train one and not work the other one out as well. If you train for bodybuilding and you get bigger, you are going to get stronger. It's pretty much impossible for it not to happen. However, perhaps your training methodology is not going to have optimal gains, in one or the other variable. So that's been pretty much the goal of this. I don't want to just look like I can lift 500 pounds. I actually want to lift 500 pounds. It is possible for one to go up a lot and the other one to go up as well, but not as much, or vice versa. That is what I tried to solve with this program. So number one is percentage based. This is probably the biggest thing, the biggest reason why I decided to do this differently. When I did programs like, old school, kind of lifting programs like 5-3-1 or small love or something, I love the idea of percentages. I love the idea of knowing, okay, Igor, you're doing this many reps for this many sets, and this percentage, which is usually calculated as a percentage of your 1 rep max. If your 1 rep max is like 250 pounds, and this says you need to do 80%, then that would be like 200 pounds for X amount of reps and sets. That always motivated me, because you're not going to the gym and you're like, okay, I know the reps and sets, but I don't really know how much weight to lift or what's my goal. I don't know, I'm just gonna try it out. Arnold used to say this, a ship that has a clear goal a clear trajectory is going to have a much higher chance of reaching that goal than a ship that doesn't have this. That ship, that boat will, it'll be lucky if it even leaves the harbor. So the more guidance you have towards a goal and your training and what is required, in my opinion, that is awesome. This weight, this many reps, that is your goal. And I would want to not only get that, I'd want to surpass it. And in doing so, just week after week, month after month, I saw the numbers climb. And I didn't realize it. It was gradual, but maybe month to month you don't see such drastic changes. But when you step back after like 6 or 12 months, you're like, holy shit, what used to be my 1 rep max, I can now blast for like 8 reps. It's my new warm up, and that's friggin' awesome. And in addition to the strength gains comes the size. So that was a big thing. Number 2 is gradual. I mentioned that a second ago, but one problem which I've had in the past is that you know how they say like your eyes are bigger than your eyes are bigger than your stomach or something when you get too much food or something you can't finish it? Similar case here. Sometimes in the past I've done programs and the first month would be really easy and I'm like, oh, I need to just jump ahead because I can, and I would jump ahead in terms of weight or intensity or whatever, and by month 2 or 3 or cycle 2 or 3 I would just hit a wall. My first month I go up 20 pounds on my squat, and my second month I go up nothing, and then my third month I go up like 2 pounds, and I'm like, okay, what the hell happened? The reason behind that is because it's not gradual. The best strength gains I ever made are somewhat gradual. It's like, you put on 10 to 15 pounds on a compound lift, cycle after cycle, month after month, and over time it adds up. I mean, when I've done this in the past when I was like younger, and that's what took me from benching 225. I'll never forget, I was like 19, and I always wanted to bench 2 plates, and I did that, and that was incredible, but I'm like, damn, 2 plates is really heavy. How am I ever gonna get to a point where I can surpass that? And it was doing this over time, gradual progression on a consistent, consistency, guys, is key. Having a long-term strategy. Doing this, I was able to build up to 275, and 225 is no longer heavy. I can do it for like 6 or 8 reps. And eventually, I did the same, and I got up to 315. Now I'm getting up to the point where I do 315 on the bench for a few reps, like 3, 4, 5, 6 in the future. And 275 is no longer that difficult. I can get in the gym any day of the week and do that for like 8 reps. Relatively easily. Frequency and volume, I'm going to talk about these somewhat together. Frequency in my program, there's actually different versions in my program. The reason behind that is not everyone should train the exact same way. A beginner should not train the same way as an intermediate, and an intermediate should not train the same way as an advanced. So in Hybrid 5, there's actually 3 versions. We've got 2 intermediate versions and 1 beginner. I didn't do an advanced version because I've seen my channel demographics, and the majority of you, like literally 90%, are intermediate and beginners, and that's what I want to focus on. I want to help the people who are somewhat new to this. I don't need to help someone who's been doing this for 10 years and already has a 500-pound squat. Good for you, congratulations. Not necessarily my target demographic. This is not made for someone who wants to compete at the Arnold and is like deadlifting 600 pounds and is a competitive powerlifter. This is for someone who wants to build some muscle, build some strength, wants to hit something like a 400-pound squat in the gym, wants to put on 10 pounds of muscle this year in the gym, something of that nature. So the frequency recommendations are going to be a little bit different between a beginner, where I might have you training as much as 3 times per week per muscle group, versus an intermediate, where it's something closer to around 2 times per week, maybe even a little less. My program for the beginners is actually structured 3 workouts per week, 3 full body workouts, and the intermediate, it's not 2 times per week, it's 2 times per 8 days. I've decided not to go with a 7-day split this time around because honestly, I don't see the point. I don't know why people think that you have to train in a 7-day split. People always ask me like, how many times do you train per week? I'm like, why does it have to be per week? The world runs on a 7-day schedule, Monday to Friday, we work, we do this, we have the weekend. But your body doesn't care. Your body doesn't know if it's Tuesday or Monday, or if it's a 6-day split, a 7-day split, or a 400-day split. It doesn't know, and it doesn't necessarily care. So what I've decided to do with this program is I've sacrificed that for something which, in my opinion, is a much more efficient split. So we actually follow an 8-day split. We are training almost 2 times per week. And the reason behind that is, although we sacrifice frequency a little bit, we up the volume, which is the next point, which is the main driver of muscle hypertrophy, guys. So because one of the complicated things when it comes to training for both strength and size is you want that intensity, you want that heavy weight and relatively low rep ranges, but you still need to maintain a relatively high amount of volume because that is what builds size. Bodybuilding is all about doing more volume in your training at a reasonable intensity, and to combine those two, that is pretty much my main goal with when I built this program. That is my main goal in my training. Next up is periodization. This may be one of the most important topics in all long-term training strategies, especially when it comes to strength. When it comes to bodybuilding and putting on muscle, periodization definitely can help, but I don't think it's as important, at least in my experience, and based on the research that I've seen in terms of, it's a lot more important, I believe, in terms of strength. So, I've done videos on this, and I don't want to talk about this for 40 minutes. For those of you guys that don't know, periodization is pretty much the way that you organize your training in the long term in terms of manipulating variables. This could be anything like volume, intensity, even frequency. This could even go into, changing exercises, changing even like rest times, exercise speed. Are you going to do the exercise over the course of 3 Mississippis or 1 Mississippi? Is it explosive? Is it, is it fast? There's so many variables you can manipulate. Whenever you are changing variables in a structure, not just like willy-nilly, oh, fuck it, I'll do this, I'll do that. But whenever you have a long-term strategy where you manipulate variables over time to, minimize injury, maximize progression, overcome plateaus, you are essentially doing some form of periodization. There's multiple forms of this. It's very like controversial as to which form is better than the other. Usually, actually, I'll get to that in a second, but yeah, it's a bit controversial as to which is the best form of periodization. So many people are proponents of one way over the other, but to be honest, I've never really seen evidence that's like, this is the one best way and everyone should do this. And again, I'll mention why in a second. There's things like daily undulating periodization, where essentially you might have like a high intensity day and a low intensity day. You got block periodization, you got linear periodization, which is obviously very popular. Then you got slightly more advanced stuff like conjugate periodization, which has been made popular by world-class gyms like Westside Barbell, where instead of manipulating quantitative variables like volume and frequency, you might be manipulating something like exercise selection or exercise, like, again, are you training like explosiveness or something like max effort, just like trying to lift as much raw weight as possible. This is really especially very good for things like strongmen, advanced powerlifting, or even like athletics, like when it comes to like sports like football or sprinting or whatever. So there's different types of periodization. Now, one of the best articles I've ever seen about this, I think it was by Greg Nuckols and if I remember correctly, I think it was Dr. Mike Israetel. But two individuals who are smarter than you, me, pretty much 99% of the people watching this video when it comes to like strength and hypertrophy and everything. Like, these guys know their shit. And they had this article, which I loved. And I think it was called, There's Only One Type of Periodization, which it was always kind of like what? There's so many kinds, like I just mentioned. But essentially it said that, and I really agree once I read it. It said that you have to work pretty damn hard to come up with a program where you're only doing one type of periodization, where it's like, we're doing linear periodization and that's it. No DUP, no block, no conjugate, nothing. It'd probably be pretty hard to actually build a program like that. A lot of times when people build programs, without even realizing it, they're doing some type of periodization. Obviously, some are done better than others, but usually that's the case. So one thing which I've actually incorporated is there's a form of daily, weekly, and monthly periodization. My program, daily, is you're going to be doing DUP, daily undulating periodization. Weekly would be simply linear. Over the course of each cycle, again, my program, although there's 8-day rounds or 8-day microcycles, there are 5 microcycles or 5 rounds in one normal cycle or a mesocycle, you might call it. So the whole cycle is 40 days. We got 8 times 5. That is going to be doing linear periodization in the sense that we are increasing intensity. You're going to be going from working with moderate weights to working with pretty damn heavy weights, and volume drops just a little bit as you progress. Not low. It goes from like high to still pretty high, or probably like moderate as you progress. So in that sense, that's linear periodization. And then monthly is somewhat conjugate in the sense that you can actually, and you actually are not enforced, but encouraged to alternate additional exercises. Although the main exercises, the main compound lifts in my program are somewhat standardized, you have a lot more customization ability when it comes to exercise selection. And going forward, like, it pretty much encourages in my program, although you're not supposed to do the exact same additional accessory movements all the time. You might be doing your bench press, but following that, you dumbbell press, incline dumbbell press, incline bench press, cable crossovers. There's additional chest or pectoral exercises that you can utilize. It's pretty much a drop down. You can select whichever one you want, and in that sense, it's a form of conjugate periodization. You can get a lot more complicated than that, but I'm not a fan of that, and I personally think that a lot of my viewers would not want to do that. More advanced levels where you get into like, it starts to get really complicated. It starts to get really advanced where you get into like, there's like dynamic effort days and max effort days and like just more so standard hypertrophy days. And you get into such different exercise variations. There's like the bench press, there's like the board press, there's like the floor press, there's squats, there's box squats, there's all this stuff. And that's definitely pretty damn good, and I think that is extremely effective. But I think for a lot of people, especially people who don't have like all this fancy stuff, like a lot of us don't have, and don't want to go out and buy like metal chains which we can hang on our bench press, or those elastic bands which kind of like, add resistance at the bottom or the top of your lift. There's all this like fancy equipment, fancy exercise that you can utilize, and that's great, but I do feel, in my personal opinion, that is a bit more of an advanced tactic. If you want to take your deadlift from 5 to 600 or 700 pounds, you might need that. But if you're trying to get up to like, if you're trying to go from 225 to 315 bench press, you probably don't need that, at least not yet. Okay, next up, strength adaptations. This one is pretty much essentially 100% when it comes to strength training. It doesn't necessarily apply to bodybuilding and hypertrophy. But if you train high intensity in terms of like heavy weights and you're gaining strength, you can't necessarily stop training that way for an extended period of time, whether it be like weeks or a few months or whatever, because you will actually lose those strength adaptations. So in my ultimate hypertrophy program, there was 3 different blocks. It was based on block periodization, and you'd have like not a light, but like a lighter, moderate, and then a heavier intensity. And the problem with that is that you'd have a reasonable amount of time, like 1 to 2 months in between heavy intensity blocks. And because of that, the strength adaptations that you may have gained when you were training something heavy, like maybe like 5x5 or like 4x6 or something, lower reps, higher intensity, higher weights, those strength adaptations, you may not maintain them if you stop training like that for 1, 2, 3 months or whatever. So that is something which I definitely had to incorporate here. That is why you're able to maintain those strength adaptations and build on top of it. You can't go from like doing something like heavy squats 3x3 and then like, all right, I'm gonna do 2 months of 3 sets of 12 and I'm gonna cut the weight down to like 60% of what I used to be doing. Because if you do, when you come back to doing intensity, you may not have grown, or you may not even have you may even be weaker. You may no longer have those strength adaptations that you once had. Next up, okay, guys, we're gonna get into some more this isn't like, hardcore science now. This is just things that I personally love and wanted to include because this makes this program, it definitely makes it more effective, but also makes it just a lot more fun, which is a big thing. I think if you're doing a program and it's technically 5% better than the alternative, but at 50% makes you want to kill yourself because it's not fun, you don't like it, chances are it's not the best program for you. So it needs to be good for muscle, for strength, and it just needs to be fun as hell. So AMRAPs, these are sets where you do as many reps as possible. These are just fun because it takes you to that 100% intensity level. I rarely say you should go to failure, but sometimes going to failure, pretty much going to like 100% of what you are capable of. Let's say I give you like X amount of weight. I'm like, rep this out as many times as you can. Sometimes that is fun to do, and also it's really good because you can use it as a measure of your strength. If I give you 225 and you're able to do 6 reps, and then next month, next cycle, you can do 225 for 7 or 8, you got stronger, nice job. So this is fun, and it's also a great way to visualize and actually see your progress. Progress tracking. This one is just more of a tool, which I think is extremely helpful to actually, again, visualize your progress and see that it is working. A lot of people, they come to me and they say, Igor, my biggest problem isn't necessarily how to train or how to eat, it's staying motivated. I can do this for a week or 2 or maybe even a few months, but then I just fall off and then I lose my progress. And then when I start again, it's kind of like, it's like I took 2 steps forward, 2 steps back, and I didn't really go anywhere. I just wasted all my time. And because of that, people give up. So tracking your progress is definitely one thing which I think is extremely important. I've actually incorporated that into my program. There's a separate tab in my program which is all about progress tracking, where it's not even manual. It's done for you. Just every now and then check back on it and see how you do. And cycle to cycle, it's going to show you your estimated 1 rep max based on calculations, based on your AMRAPs. Again, everything's tied together. And this way, you can actually visualize your progress. And I highly recommend you guys do that as well. You can write it down on a piece of paper, you can do it in Excel, you can email it to yourself. I don't care what you do, but track your progress long term. Because, if you go up like 5 pounds in the bench press week to week or month to month, it's not that exciting. But do that for 12 months. That 5 pounds is now 60 pounds. That's like going from 225 to 285. That is a pretty big increase. And that's going to feel pretty awesome. And you might not see it week to week or month to month, but long term, if you can visualize that, it'll keep you motivated. And when you get there, it's friggin' awesome. That's a non-equal sign. Not equally, pretty much don't do the same crap over and over again. This does tie into periodization, obviously, because you can't do the same thing over and over again, week to week, workout to workout, because, again, it doesn't take advantage of periodization, long-term changes and variables and adaptations in your program. However, what I mean here is just do something exciting. When I was younger, I did the standard. I go into the gym and I do something like 5x5 or whatever, and I do the same thing all the time for workouts. And when you're a beginner, that's not necessarily a bad thing. But eventually, I want to do different workouts day to day or week to week. And it's going to make your program, not only is it going to make it more effective and more efficient, but it's going to make your program just more fun. So that's pretty much one of the reasons why I incorporated this into my, besides the fact that it's efficient, that it makes it more exciting, because on a weekly basis, you may be doing like a higher intensity than a lower intensity, higher volume, like overhead press, deltoid workouts. And then week to week, that's going to change again, because the percentages are different between weeks 1, week 2, week 3, week 4, week 5. The percentages are constantly changing. Literally all 40 days per cycle are essentially in some way different between the other days. So because of that, you're always kind of doing something new that's exciting, that's efficient, and that's awesome. So next up, pyramid training. Again, something which I actually mentioned in a recent video of mine, how I said it's kind of overrated. Pyramid training is overrated because I don't think it necessarily gives you like reverse pyramid training, ascending pyramid training, non-pyramid training, just kind of just keeping things flat. None of these are really going to be more efficient than the other. I don't see any scientific evidence pointing towards that. But for some people, they are funner. And if that's the case, go ahead, do it. It's awesome. However, I don't think you should rely on exclusively one type of training, which is why in my case, when I say pyramid training, I mean a combination of everything. Again, guys, there are 5 weeks or 5 rounds per cycle. So because of that, one week may be focusing on reverse pyramid training, another one may be just flatline, another one may be ascending pyramid training, and I've kind of strategically implemented where that should be. The heavier stuff is going to be more so reverse pyramid training, and the moderate, higher volume stuff is going to be more so like ascending or flat style pyramid training. So the reason I say this is because it's exciting, it's interesting, and obviously sometimes we like to go in the gym like with reverse pyramid training, and we like to just, all right, how many reps can I do on this heavy set and really feel as big and strong as I possibly can. In the long term of things, the things that actually get you big and strong is going to be things like frequency, volume, and intensity, and how you manipulate those variables. But additional tactics like this, there's nothing wrong with that, and if you like it, do it. I've incorporated that into my program because I personally do like playing around with that kind of stuff. Next up, deload, something which a lot of us don't like, but guess what? You need to do it. Programs which just say like, hey, you should do a deload every now and then, that's not enough. My program has like a specific, like, you have a deload, you gotta do it, here it is. And the deload tells you what to do. It's also percentage based. It tells you what percentage you're lifting at, how many reps, how many sets. Obviously it's a bit less, the volume's a bit less, the intensity's a bit less, the frequency's a bit less, but you need to do that, guys. Deloading is extremely important, especially when you're training at a relatively high intensity, such as in this case, you need to if you're gonna be training this hard, in addition to sleep on a daily basis and eating on a daily basis, you also need these deload weeks. And again, it's up to the individual when they want to incorporate them. Obviously, if you're training higher intensity, you probably need more frequent deloads and vice versa. But in my case, there's one deload round after 4 rounds of training. So progressively gets higher intensity, deload, repeat the process. I know a lot of people don't like doing deloads and they want to skip them. Don't do that. If you're training high intensity, sufficiently high intensity, you need those. Your body will thank you later. It will decrease your chances of burning out, overtraining. It'll decrease your chances of injury, and it'll increase your strength in the long term. Sometimes, you need to take a couple steps forward, and sometimes you need to take 1 step back, because in the long run, it's going to get you to your destination in the fastest, most efficient, and safest way possible. So definitely incorporate deloads into your workouts. And the final thing I've already mentioned is the delta, meaning difference. Difference in experience is, depending on your experience level, you should be training the same. Again, my program's got a version that's for intermediates, actually 2 versions for intermediates, one with and one without deadlifts, one beginner version, which has all the main compound lifts, and then finally, when it comes to advanced, there is no advanced version, because I don't want to focus on that because that's a different topic and that's a very small subset of my audience. A lot of people who think they're advanced probably aren't. But again, it's a spectrum. A lot of people think that it's like levels, like beginner, intermediate, advanced, elite, super elite, or whatever. It's not like you hit a certain weight and then in the middle it's like, congratulations, here's your elite lifting jacked guy card. It doesn't work like that. It's a spectrum. A lot of us are kind of in between something. And that is why when it comes to my case, if you're a beginner, but you've been training for like a year or two, and you're kind of thinking about graduating into the intermediate program, that is why I wanted to, I thought about the idea of selling each one individually, but I'm like, fuck it, I'm gonna make it one big bundle, and that way people who, get this, and they consider themselves to be beginners, they could train with that, and over time, in 6 months, they have the option to graduate to the intermediate program, or vice versa. You think you're intermediate, turns out it's kind of hard, and you can't really do it. Step back down to the beginner program for maybe just a few months, or like 6-8 months or whatever, and then when you feel you're ready, when you got your strength and your muscle up, graduate to the intermediate version. Again, it's a spectrum, and where you are on the spectrum it's kind of hard to quantify, but that's why I want to give you some options. You can bounce back and forth between the two depending on where you think that you are. And guys, the last thing I want to mention before we close out this program, yes, my program Hybrid 5 is now live. If you want to check it out, I'll leave a link down in the description box below. And the biggest reason that I advocate that if you're interested, you should definitely go and try it out, in addition to all this stuff, is simply time. Everybody has a time value of money. How much do you value your time? If you work for 30 bucks an hour, your 1 hour is worth 30 bucks. If you work for 10 hours, your 10 hours are worth 300 bucks. And the reason I say this is because a lot of us, if we want to train the best possible way, we're gonna have to put some time into it in terms of research, in terms of building the best possible model. Now, if you're gonna be doing this for 12 months or years, you're gonna be training this way for a long time, you're gonna invest a lot of time into that. So because of that, you have to invest some time into research and into building something. But if you can get a program which you know for a fact is gonna kick your ass and it's gonna do the work, and it's gonna be like 30 or 40 bucks or something, and instead of doing that, you're gonna build it yourself over the course of 10 hours, that essentially means that your time value of money is $4 per hour, and I think that's below minimum wage. So that's pretty crappy. So again, guys, that's it. The program is out. And even, again, this isn't 100%. My channel is not just like, buy my shit. Number one, look at this. See if anything can help you incorporate it into your training strategy. And I hope you build a shit ton of muscle. And I'll see you guys in the next video.